Hello, sweeties. Good news. Remember how I made that video where I thought I lost my footage? I made this video and I thought I lost my footage. But I found it. I put it in some other stupid folder. Usually I don't make special folders for my footage until I'm actually editing it. But I made a special folder for this footage before I edited it. Probably because I was so excited about it. You know how sometimes you treat things with extra love and care and it bites you in the butt? That's the situation I got myself into here. And that also will relate to detachment and attachment, which is something I'll talk about later in this video. Enough about my wacky hijinks. Let me show you how I made this painting. I toned the panel with some transparent red iron oxide. I just used a rag and rubbed around the paint with the medium mixed into it. And then I did a lot of drawing for this one. The idea for this painting I kind of had ahead of time, so it wasn't totally subconscious because I knew kind of what I wanted to do, but the drawing was a little more subconscious because I was just focusing on like composition and like the shape design and stuff. I even ended up doing a drawing for it while I was on jury duty. After I had the idea and some drawings of what I wanted to do, I started making the maquette. For this one, I wanted to make sure that I had a solid maquette to work from because the painting I did before this, I made a really low effort maquette and it just kind of caused more problems. So if you're gonna do something, do it right. I started with the pancakes. These pancakes are made out of Sculpey clay, the gray kind. I baked them and then I started painting them. I was the most excited to put this little glob of yellow paint on top for the butter. That was like my top priority when I was making these pancakes, was to get them done so that I could add that glob of butter on top. Making pancakes is a lot of fun. I fell in love with making little pancakes. I could easily just quit my whole life and only make miniature pancakes. I also needed some reference for the fast food containers. The trickster is kind of a god of eternal appetite, kind of a god of bad decisions. And so fast food tends to be that way, at least in my life, sadly. So I found some miniature templates for how to make empty fast food containers. These are for like models, but I traced the templates and I cut them out. I could have printed them out, but I needed them to be in a certain size in relation to the pancakes. So it was just easier to make them that size on my screen and then trace them rather than trying to do it digitally in Photoshop or something. It was just so much more straightforward to just trace it. Then I cut them out and I folded them up. I didn't have any normal glue, so I ended up using some matte medium to seal up the fry container. Matte medium is really like the ultimate thing to have as a painter. It works as a good medium. You can use it to glaze and all of that type of stuff, but it also works as a solid glue. I've used it to fix paintbrushes before. And again, with this, I can't believe how addictive it is. More than once, I thought about how funny it was that making model trains and that type of thing has always seemed like such a goofy, dorky, old dad thing to do. And now here I am making model McDonald's trash. Then I also had this idea for a table that I wanted everything to sit on. I probably could have just put it on a box or some kind of flat surface, but I had a specific idea for how the table should be shaped. And in retrospect, I can't tell how crucial this, like creating this detail was for the overall painting, if it even made a difference at all, or if I would have just been better off using a cardboard box and then figuring out the details from imagination or some reference online. But I made it anyways, and I made it out of an old sketchbook for the base, that hard cardboard backing that sketchbooks had, and I cut it up to the size I wanted it to be. Then I cut up this old box of Oreo cakesters, which, don't judge me, They're delicious. You should try them. So I cut them up to the size of the table, and then I glued all the pieces together and made kind of the tabletop. Then I cut up some pieces of mixed media paper to the sizes, and this will be kind of like a paneling, the way that you would put like that fake wood paneling on a wall or something. And I cut up these mixed media papers, and then I painted them burnt umber brown and created some scratchy wood textures on them. And then again, using my matte medium, I glued them all to the surface, covering that Oreo cake stirs box. I used Kleenex as a tablecloth. Later on in the process, I ended up using an old pillowcase that I just set up on a regular table, and I took a picture of for reference because I liked it better. But for the maquette, I ended up using this Kleenex for that. I just didn't like the way it ended up looking folded, but that's way down the line. I learned from watching those mini sculpting videos to put cornstarch on the surface that you're sculpting on so that the clay doesn't stick to it. Everything sculptural is so new to me that I am always just learning things about it, and I love what I'm learning. Then I started arranging all the stuff that I had made onto the table. Then I lit it up. There's a hole in the top of the box that's just going to let in a certain amount of directional light. I've probably said this in a video before, but that's a little trick that I got from Caravaggio and how he got that dramatic lighting in his painting. After I saw how it looked under the light, I decided to go back in with some of my sculpture tools, my mini loop tool, my rake tool, and kind of redefined the gooey flesh. That's what all that clay is going to be. I played around with the light a little bit more, and I started taking pictures of it and thinking about am I forgetting anything? And then I remembered, oh yeah, I am forgetting something. The diamonds. I want some diamonds sitting on top of that gooey flesh. So I put some of those babies on, and then I took my pictures. And I brought those pictures into Photoshop and just kind of looked at them, studied them a little bit, and then I put a grid over them in Photoshop to do a grid transfer onto the panel that I have already toned and done a little bit of automatic drawing on. The main reason to do this is to see how my maquette compares to my initial automatic marks. I use the automatic marks to help guide me in making the maquette and trying to get it the right size. But this is going to show me how far off I am. I've mentioned my friend Lauren comparing my process to a mudskipper, which is an amphibious fish that is known for its ability to live for prolonged time underwater and above water. So my process starts underwater from the subconscious, this automatic drawing technique and all of that type of stuff. And then I take that stuff to the land to pre-visualize what I want the painting to look like, to make all that stuff concrete. That's what surrealism kind of is to me. It's taking that subconscious, that stuff below the surface, and bringing it above the surface and treating it with the same amount of realism that you would paint a straightforward portrait or landscape or still life. And so at this point, this is where the water meets the land, where I see how what I've built actually matching up to that subconscious process. So the grid is one way to check that. And this point in the process for me is actually kind of difficult. Do I literally just translate my reference that I've made to the piece and disregard the original thing? Is the automatic drawing, was the point of that to get me to this point, and now I can kind of shed it like old skin and paint this new thing that I've spent a lot of time doing? Or do I go back underwater a little bit and lean more into the original automatic drawing and just use kind of the reference whenever I feel like I don't understand some aspect of the lighting or something? Usually it's just a subtle dance of trying to find the balance between those things. Ultimately, the paint is the guide. So I follow principles of painting. I just start by blocking in the shapes initially, and I focus on the values. After I've blocked in those bigger shapes, I start focusing on the values of the individual things with some variations of gray paint. So I have the warm and cool, and now I'm starting to use a limited but dynamic range of values. So like 3 or 4 values. I have the black, and then I'll use some darker gray, and then probably 2 middle and lighter values for the lighter areas. This is one reason to make the maquette, is to see how the lighting affects the whole, the thing as a whole. So I'm looking at that, just the biggest shapes. That's the whole process, is working big to small. Now, I spend the most time in this stage. This is the grisaille stage, where I'm painting a grayscale version of the whole painting to be colored later. To be honest, this is the whole painting. Even though there's no color, whatever I do here is going to affect the color when I start adding it later. So that's why I spend way more time here. I struggle between translating the reference versus copying the reference. It can be hard after building a lot of reference to not simply just copy it, because that is what's in my mind while I'm doing it. Get it as close as possible so that I can just look at it and then make it on the canvas. So that is in my mind the whole time that I'm creating it, but it gets weird when you're translating that onto the actual painting, because you want the design to look good and you want things to flow, and the reference that you've made doesn't always reflect what you want. It can be kind of tricky, and you spend all this time doing it and you can get attached to it. And for the past couple of days, I've been thinking about this idea of detachment in art, and the importance of being able to detach. And like I was talking about at the beginning with my folders, how there can be kind of a problem with becoming too attached to your work. Like, I created those folders because I was attached to this footage, but it ended up kind of making my life harder, because I should have just treated it like all my other footage, and then I would have been able to find it. I listened to this interview with the writer George Saunders, and he talks about his process. He writes from a place of pure emotion, whatever comes to mind, almost stream of consciousness, right? If you've ever read his work, though, it's very direct. Simple. It's not the type of thing that you would imagine with stream of consciousness, like long run-on sentences that don't cohere and sometimes don't even go anywhere. It's very direct, and it's also very powerful. So that raw emotion he's getting out survives the editing process. In this interview, he talked about how he also bases this editing process on intuition, not overanalyzing it, and just kind of going through it in a kind of flow state, and just trusting your gut and chopping things out that don't belong there, or whatever the edit needs to be. Not sitting there fixated on what needs to be fixed, shaping it using that same sort of intuition and that same sort of just going with the flow of it. That was something that really has stuck with me for the past couple of days, because I've always been kind of, the Mudskipper thing of like, just let it flow out, but then like there's that hard work of there's a documentary called Beauty is Embarrassing. Actually, I think Chet might have told me this, and I've never actually seen the documentary. But he talks about digging ditches, and how you do this fun part. You do this, automatic drawing part for me. And then you do the digging ditches part, which is you build these maquettes and figure out the painting, and that's the hard part. But what stuck with me about this George Saunders thing is how treating that with the same type of flow and intuition, and not getting fixated on things, and just being able to have that same kind of easiness that comes through with the automatic drawing and that type of thing. That's really what I've been thinking about lately, and what I'm trying to focus on in my work right now. And especially after watching the process of this painting, I've been thinking about that, because I feel this struggle to get it right, and you can call it perfectionism, and you can root it in your anxiety or whatever it is, but you have this strive, or at least I do, to make something great, right? Which is a noble goal. You want to make it great for you, but it's also like you want people to see something in it that they relate to, or that they go, yes, I felt that before. And that ambition is a noble goal which justifies hard work, right? But then what is hard work? In my snow removal days or my construction days, there's something that needs to be done, and the only way to do it is to just roll up your sleeves and literally throw your body at it until the thing is done. And that's hard work. That's labor. But in art, this type of hard work can backfire. Like, people will say it looks too labored, and that's like a criticism of your work. There's a certain type of touch to really great work that isn't labor and that just throwing your body at the painting. Hard labor can get in the way of this great thing that you're trying to do. And so the work can be this type of detachment that I think George Saunders was describing. Just being able to flow and being able to forget about everything and just kind of trust your gut about it and forget how the reference looks. Does it look interesting on the canvas that you're actually painting on? And if not, like, get rid of it and figure out a different way to do that. And forget about how much time you spent on this one thing and how good it might have looked at one point in the process. If it's not working anymore, you have to change it. You have to get it out of there. And so the answer to this idea of detachment isn't just to thoughtlessly work or aimlessly work. That's not the detachment I'm talking about. Sometimes the detachment requires a lot more work and a lot more thought. You'll realize, for example, for me, that the plate that your pancakes are on doesn't really look like a plate the way that you sculpted it. So your reference really is kind of screwing you up, and you'll actually have to position a plate and take photographs of it or build a 3D model to solve the problem. But you'll have to be detached from the rest of the work that you've already done so that you can actually make yourself do that. If you think, I already spent hours sculpting this reference, I'm not going to do any more of that, I'm done with that stage of the process, you're not allowing yourself to detach and realize that you got to do a little bit more work. In a way, this ties back in with me being a mud skipper. I want to have good reference to figure out my bizarre subconscious visions. I also need to stay true to the reference when it's relevant and forget it when it's not, or be willing to revise it when I need to. And I think the way to be a good mud skipper is to detach from what has come before and from what you think might happen or will happen. Does it look how you want it to? Does it look good but it doesn't make sense? Don't try to make it make sense at the expense of making it look labored or forced. Stay submerged in that situation. Do you need more clarity on how that thing looks in order to paint it better? Figure out the reference. Go back to the land. So that's kind of less of a how to paint and more of a how to think, or at least how I'm trying to think. Have fun. Good night, sweeties.